Okay, let's see if this works.
Yeah.
Well, hello, gorgeous.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm
Like
good.
it's early afternoon for you. It's evening for me, so it's pitch black out.
Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah, I'm excited to see the sunlight kind of peeking through behind you.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're glowing and radiant. You look like you've just woken up. So, yes, Zoom, I learn something from Zoom every time. They're continuously updating and changing. So now, if you are a panelist, apparently you cannot turn on your camera. So I have to make you a co-host. So I know that moving forward.
All right.
Well,
Fantastic.
yeah, I guess we will be recording this, just so everyone knows. We'll send a follow-up after the presentation. Hopefully, all of our attendees can stay for the duration. At the end, we will be announcing a participant who gets awarded a fun surprise from a very generous supporter gift suite. It's actually, I have a new connection, their subscriber, and a really unique company based out of Los Angeles, female, minority led, and they really work to choose very unique, privately owned businesses to kind of curate these thoughtful gifts. So I thought, how perfect, when we're talking about the art of relationships and connections and communication, gift giving can definitely be like a language of love. So one of you lucky participants, if you can stay till the end, will be awarded one of those. I'm sure, as Stacy's speaking, there'll be comments, questions. Feel free, you can drop those in the Q&A. We'll make sure to leave time at the end for those. I'll also just kind of casually mention how Stacy and I first met probably early last year. We were both in a really incredible group called Fusion 42. It's mainly comprised of different founders, startups, investors, mentors, industry experts, and Stacy heads the female founders channel, which really I just enjoy. I mean, they are individuals from all over the globe, and her energy and leadership and guidance is remarkable, and it's just very inspiring. So I've come to know her work, and I'm so pleased to be able to share your wisdom with the Family Office List Network. It's just an amazing way that we can kind of expand our community and grow and learn together. I think those are really all of my main announcements. I also wanted to mention next week, this is probably one you'll really enjoy as well, Stacy. Another colleague, David Homan, who's the CEO and founder of Orchestrated Connecting, will be presenting
Right.
on the art of relationships. So that's one to tune into.
Okay.
So I'll just kind of formally read your bio so that everyone can get acquainted with you and your amazing journey. But also, I love that through your presentation, you'll dive really into that journey and how it's led you to where you are. So it's funny. I thought that I had your bio set right here. I apologize. Stacy, with a strong background in family business, pivoted to the corporate world for over 26 years, leading the charge in innovation and transformation. Returning to entrepreneurship, she launched Equati in London. This venture is a data-centric, AI-focused platform designed to match family office investments with opportunities that not only resonate with their core values, but also serve as an engine for generational wealth and societal impact. So without further ado, I will pass things over to Stacy so that she can share her wisdom with us.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you to the entire audience that's not only here today, but those that may listen to us after. And for everyone else's knowledge, this is not the first time that Danielle and I have done a webinar together. So we got the luxury of working together where I hosted and Danielle presented Family Office List. So this is fun to kind of reverse roles a little bit.
Definitely changing hats.
Yeah. So as Danielle mentioned, we're going to do Q&A at the end. So any questions that come up, feel free to pop them into the chat, and we should have probably 20 minutes at the end. I am really excited to bring to you some really fun stuff, and it's really the amalgamation of everything that I've done over the last, gosh, more than 30 years, plus just my upbringing. So Danielle, I know that you and I talk a lot about language. We talk about flipping the coin, changing the narrative, even inviting a new perspective. So today we are going to do that. We are going to dig deep into language, values, beliefs, perceptions, and even some fun little nuggets and some tactical things, really around all the elements of communication and the impact that really affects every culture of every family office. So I do have a desire for everyone here today, and that's to walk away with 3 tactical tools that talk to that flip the coin, that refine and modernize language, really focused on keeping your legacy alive, and then how to get what you want over being right. And there's a difference, and we'll dig a little bit into that. I feel like that could be its own separate masterclass. In fact, when I was putting this together, I'm like, gosh, these could be all separate, so many of these could be all separate masterclasses on their own. So I am super grateful to be here today, and thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. I feel like it is to be continued, and I do have to say, I think most people here know I am such a visual person. So having that analogy of flipping the coin, I've learned so much from just that single takeaway, and it's really helped open my eyes. Sometimes we get so in our head and the way we perceive things, but when we can take a step back and look at it from a different way, it's just a game changer. So yeah, excited to hear more about that.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, well, actually, while I set the foundation, Danielle is going to launch a poll. 5 questions, really easy, something fun at the end. And I would invite you to participate in the poll because we will talk about it in just a little bit.
Awesome. So that should be launched. Feel free, drop in the chat if anyone does not see that poll for any reason.
Perfect. So there is a misconception by most about communication, and that's speaking what's on your mind, whether it's a desire, a request, a demand, or a wish, is communicating well. But communication is multidimensional. It is language. So what are the words that you're using, the nomenclature? What is your body language, and how are you expressing yourself? It's your perceptions and your beliefs. It's your intention. So what do you seek to gain out of the communication that you're having, whether it's one person or a group? What's your context in your history? What's not only the context of the conversation, what might be the context of the conversation that you've had in the past? So that historical piece. And then how well have you communicated with that person in the past, or not at all? It's also culture. So familial, and every family has their own culture, societal, race, gender, and beyond. It's values. What do you value? And what are those with whom you speak? And one of my favorite, and I'll even give a little example, is tone and voice. And it's near and dear to my heart for all sorts of reasons. But it's really important for people to understand that you can be confident and have fear. And there is this misperception by many that, and I'll even explain how this plays out in particular for women. It's common for women to make a statement, be confident in what they're speaking about, and end the statement with either an uptick or as if it's a question, which leaves people confused. Was it rhetorical? Do they need some help? Are they confident? And so even we as women get to learn how to use that and really transform that when we're asking for something, when we're requesting or we have a desire. We get to speak with clarity. We may be nervous about it. We may be in fear, but we get to speak a different way that expresses our confidence. The kind of the opposite of that might even be assertive or projection. So you can be assertive and speak from a grounded place. But when you start to lean in and get close to somebody, that's really a projection. You're projecting yourself. So tone and voice can show up in all these ways that most people don't understand, not only with themselves, but with other people. And the last, but this is certainly not the least, but the top 9 that I focus on the most is your audience. Are you actually communicating the appropriate message to the right audience? And this is common in sales, right? But even beyond that, if you're sitting down for a family conversation, do you actually have the right people that you want there to have that conversation? So you might be asking, why is this important now? It's always important in my mind. However, we have this trifecta or even more of some really amazing historical events. We have the Great Wealth Transfer, so 84 trillion in the next 20 years, passing generations. And if I remember correctly, it's more than 30% is impacting ultra high net worth and family office. Yet when we look at the historical figures of the generational transition of family offices, only 25% make it to the second, only 10% make it to the third, and only 5% make it to the fourth. So when we look at what's happening with this great wealth transfer, and then the historical, which I hope that we get to change as part of this, that very few will actually survive the great wealth transfer. But what's really interesting in all of this is this shift, in particular with the wealth and the wealth being transferred to the women. And in the US and the UK alone, I believe it's between 60 and 70% between the two countries that's transferring to women.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it's this, call it multiple internal and external factors. I call it dynamic. Some might call it contention, but as an opportunist, I truly see this as an opportunity because it's this generational shift. It's a gender dynamic shift. It's a communication and legacy, which we'll dig into a little bit later. And then how do you intermingle those with the existing operational challenges that family offices have today? So I just get really excited for the opportunity, which again is like flipping its coin on its head. The fear of, is it going to go away, or the excitement that there's something there? And I truly believe that there's something there.
There is just so much change. There's so much disruption. And exactly, some people can run from that change, fear.
Yeah.
But exactly, if you see it through the right lens, so much opportunity.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. So I'm assuming that we've at least got some that have answered the poll, Danielle?
Yes, we do. Not everyone. We encourage you to join in. Don't be afraid.
So I'm curious, where are we on the sprinkles?
Oh, well, we've got no for 3. We have I don't like donuts for 1. So no one likes sprinkles.
Danielle, do you like sprinkles?
I do. I mean, I like a little fun in my life. My kids, their biggest treat is when Nana and Granddad watch them. They put sprinkles on their pancakes. Now, is that something I do? No, but it's, creating those memories, those special moments. So,
yeah.
If it brings joy, life is short.
That's a good point. I'm normally not a sprinkles girl. However, I do like sprinkles. Mm-hmm. So I like that reframe. I might consider that next time. Sprinkles for joy. All right. Well, before we dig into the language, as Danielle mentioned, let's talk a little bit about me and why my story and what led me to this. So family business is near and dear to my heart. My father was a third generational business owner, and my mother was an entrepreneur. So business for us wasn't just an occupation, it was completely our world. It taught me really the full scope of what relentless work, habits, and ethics look like. Our home was nonstop business activity. So it truly, from the time that we woke up to the time that we went to bed, and sometimes in between when those late night phone calls happened, pre-cell phone, and it was the ring, ring, ring of the landline. So there was this work life, if you will, that was constantly blurred. So I chose to escape and go into corporate, and for more than 26 years led these really fun and innovative initiatives in healthcare, mobile, and financial services. But what I also found was there was this eerily familiar blurred lines environment. The more that you kind of sunk in and started climbing the ladder, that work life was very much intermingled. And so when what I thought was I had escaped it, but yet it was still there and very present to me. Early in my corporate career, I married a generational family business owner. So I got to experience firsthand some of the challenges that my parents faced. It gave me a window of opportunity to really appreciating the sacrifices that my parents made and a deeper understanding of legacy. And now I do my best to carry it forward to my 2 young adult children, because one of them in particular is considering taking over the family business. What got me into language and communication? It was threefold. One, I was, call it a visionary at a very young age. I was very vibrant and exceptionally curious. So with business at the forefront, I actually lacked the attention to be able to speak up and speak out about what I was seeing. And because I was so quiet and I was watching all this human behavior happen, it helped me understand actions to the words being spoken. Which also then this led me on this very deep and personal and professional development journey. So I learned how me as myself minimized situations, any of my learnings, the things that I did well. And then I also learned about speaking an outdated language about what was happening over what was possible. So for me, that became the flip the coin. How do you flip all of this on its head? But the corporate experience also led me into emotional intelligence. I was leading some very large, very visible projects that were with very entrepreneurial, highly emotional, very large investment opportunities. And one of the things that we struggled with was communication. And you can only take so many communication courses to know that it's not just about the communication, it's really about the human behavior and how people show up. And so that led me into emotional intelligence coaching, certification in coaching, and a string of some other positive psychology certifications that really allowed me to lead through coaching and emotional intelligence, and also get into the feminine and the masculine, which again is a fun, separate conversation about communicating. Yet the fire never left me. And in 2020, it's been 2 years, I left the States and moved to London. And I've started now Equati. And Equati, as Danielle mentioned, is a wealth tech AI SaaS platform for family offices to drive insights and recommendations from their data for their impact investment opportunities. And in addition, I have Global Collective, which is a management consulting office that helps family offices, entrepreneurs, business owners, and founders reduce to lead with empathy to reduce friction and frustration. And then that led me to Danielle. All right. So enough about me. Let's move back to the great wealth transfer and the 84 trillion. So we have this shift in wealth and gender dynamics. We have this modernization of language. We have this transformation of beliefs and perception, and what I like to call old school and new school language. So I'm going to share my screen and allow you guys to see what I'm talking about for visuals. Whoops, that is not. Here we go. Oops. All right. So let's talk about old school over new school language. So philanthropy. We know philanthropy to be really about giving without the expectation of return. Philanthropy for sure has its place. It has changed worlds. It has changed economies. It has changed businesses. It's done a lot for so many years. When we shift to the new school language, what we're seeing now is impact investing. So it is really focused on the societal and environmental impact in addition to creating a return. And so if I remember correctly, and Danielle, you might even know this more up to date, the last that I heard, a lot of family offices are roughly 10% of their alternative investments are focused on impact investing. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's one in particular, I believe it's called Blue Haven Initiative. Mm-hmm. Everything is all impact investing. So it's still focused on working in communities and really enabling and empowering communities in a way that traditional philanthropy might have done. However, they also have this focus on this return on investment. And so they work in very specific communities such as Africa because the dollar goes further. Yet, even in their portfolio and their stocks and their equities and their other investments, it's all impact investing focused. So they've taken it to the extreme. I will only cover off on a couple of these. I won't go into all of these. But I do want all of you to see how this language is not necessarily as different as we think that it is. And then I'll talk a little bit about the key change with this. The next, I'll jump down to the third one, asset allocation over sustainable ESG investing. So again, very similar. You have your traditional stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, those types of asset allocation. Sustainable in ESG investing is very similar, but again, it goes back to companies and funds that are focused on ESG. So it doesn't exclude your traditional asset classes. It includes this element of really social responsibility, the governance, or the environmental impact that these businesses have on each other. We all have an impact on each other, and that's what this ESG investing is about. And last that I'll cover is return on investment. So you have your traditional, you're going to invest in something, you expect a return. Return on impact is that, and also the ESG focus. And it might not be all of them, it might be one, but it's where else can you as a family office and a family business include yourself in impacting the world in a different way. And there's countless, endless opportunities with which you can do that, and more are popping up every day. It's actually really exciting, because what we're doing is we're looking at this traditional language that has been used, that is so well known, and we're inviting really the and aspect of it. There isn't an or, It's an and, it adds, it's expansive, if you will. And that is really important, in particular when we talk about values. So we have this language that exists, and the shift in the language, even for the values, it is very much like this as well. And I'll cover off on that too, to give some examples. So a common example would be, a common phrase is risk aversion. How risk averse might you be? When I think about that, I think of actually my body closing up, like I'm just going to protect myself. Whereas comprehensive risk awareness includes educating yourself more deeply on what opportunities are out there. So how do you still get to manage your risk and also understand what are the other things out there that either may allow you to increase your risk in something and be aware of what that risk might be holistically when you start to think bigger and broader. The next, the next is asset accumulation. And the new is sustainable growth. So again, when I think of asset accumulation, I think of it as a very closed circuit. But as you and I well know, Danielle, money circulates. Money's always in circulation, always, always. Sustainable growth is really about that. What is it that we can do that we can continue to not only accumulate and return, accumulate and return, and it's about growing in addition to that. And the last is financial prosperity. And the really interesting thing about this one, when you look at holistic wealth, people are seeing wealth in more ways than money, more ways than the finances. It's, as I say it, there are 5 healths. There's emotional health, financial health, spiritual health, mental health, and physical health. And holistic wealth falls into that. Where else in your life are you also expanding your values that are beyond the financial aspect of it? Because now in particular, we're seeing the rise in mental health and mental illness, and that falls not only with entrepreneurs and founders, but even in family business. The stress and the contention and the challenges that they navigate as not only a family, but being in business together. And so for me, especially when I think about holistic wealth and have done some research on it, this is a really important thing to consider as we become more aware of how our bodies work, how we impact the business when we are stressed, where we get to take breaks. Danielle, you and I have talked about this a lot, how it's sometimes so hard to remove ourselves. And then when you have a family and you're raising a family, even more so. So this is one that's close to my heart as well. Mm-hmm. All right. So let's move on to the juicy stuff. Let's talk about 3 tactical communication strategies. And I will give an example for each one of these. So the first one is when we think about communicating, and back to what I mentioned before about getting what you want over being right, this is where some of this is going to start to play out. The examples that I've given can be used really, you can use any one of them. What I've given you, or what I've given all of you here, is an example of one that might work better one-on-one, when you're just talking one-on-one. The other might work better in a group. And the last is something you can do even on your own, especially when you think about the one thing I didn't tap into is communicating to yourself and by yourself and with yourself, and some of those negative thoughts and the things that we can stir up even before we go into a conversation with somebody else. So all of these I have used in all sorts of various capacities, but with this, I will, like I said, I'll give an example. So let's dive in. The first one is really about identifying what you want. So understanding your passions and your motives and really flipping the perspective. So the example I have is a real one. It's still in the works. It's been in the works for a while. And that is, when do you do it? Usually when you have a disconnect between two people, or maybe when you sense something isn't right, or it even could be a difficult conversation and you want to approach it with the utmost curiosity. So my live situation is I have two adult children, mid-20s, and the youngest is considering taking over his father's family business. And at first I was like, oh, no, because I've seen the pain, I've witnessed the pain. His older brother kind of dabbled in that for a while. And so my first kind of jump feet first in was, I don't want you to do that. I would really like for you to find your path outside of family business. And he kind of looked at me funny, and I'm like, I'm not comfortable with how they're approaching this. It doesn't feel good. I watched your dad go through that, and it was so uncomfortable. And then I watched him completely deflate. And I thought, okay, this is not on me to decide. I really need to dig into what does he decide is best for him. So I flipped everything on his head, and I asked myself, A, what would success look like in our relationship as mother-son? And B, if I were to have any influence on his success, what would I want that to look like and feel like? And it really boiled down to the fact that I wanted him to be healthy, wealthy, and doing something in his strengths. I just wanted him to love what he's doing. And that isn't for me to decide. So the next conversation that we had, and the multiple conversations after, have been really about, if you were to take a leadership role in the company, what would it look like? What interests you the most? What do you feel are your strengths? What else have I asked him? What would feel like success right now? That doesn't have to be 10 years or 20 years from now, but even next year, in 3 years, what does that look like? And probably the most important for me that I continue to ground back to is, what can I do to support you on this journey? How may I support you? What do you need from me? And since I've flipped that coin, I've led that narrative to have different conversations. He's coming out a little bit more and expressing what is desirable for him, what is resonating more with him, what is exciting him. And not only that, what's not. And when there's something that does come to mind, I ask for his permission. So for example, his father's in construction, upper end residential construction. And I said to him, as somebody, he's a gamer, have you looked at what's happening in AI with residential construction? And that got him going, and that got him really excited. So since then I've left it, but this is really for me, that one thing that I wanted for him was to be healthy, wealthy, and successful. So being able to flip everything and not make it about me and really start to understand has changed the dynamic in that. And the next is reverse engineering in conversations. And this is a fun one. So Danielle, I'm going to use you as an example.
Amazing.
Okay. So when do you do it? It's really to bring consensus to a group. It's focused on getting buy-in and accountability, which I know sometimes can lack, especially when you have big visions and big goals. Who's really accountable for doing what they're doing? And the next the how is to identify that end outcome or intention, and then reverse engineer the discussion points. So the example I'm going to use with you, Danielle, is let's say you've told your team that you are, for 2024, you have an annual revenue goal of 10 million. And it's a 50% increase year over year. So you say to Harry, or excuse me, you say to your group, okay, we have this goal. What do you think you could bring to this goal that would drive that increase in revenue? And let's say Harry says, oh, Danielle, I'm so excited. I want to build out new partnerships. And you're like, great, awesome. And then Clark says, you know what? I want to do global expansion. And Danielle, you say, you know what? That's awesome. We've only dabbled in it just a little bit, and I would love to go deep and dig deep. And then Sally says, you know what? We're going to bring a new product. I want to bring a new product. And I have just the idea. I've been researching and listening to our customers, and these are the things that I think we can do. So then Danielle, one of your questions back to them might be, okay, Harry, tell me what that would look like. Play that out for me. Let's envision that we have 3 new big partnerships this year. What would it look like? What would it feel like? Talk about it. And also tell me, what do you need? What do you need from me? What do you need from the group? Is there something that we don't yet have that we need to go figure out and bring in? And then you do the same with the other 2. Okay, global visibility, what would that look like? Tell me. Create this story, this fun story for them to get really excited. And then the new product line. Okay, awesome. What do you think you need? How much, all of this, how much is it going to cost? What's going to get involved? How are we going to get involved? And then in addition, you start to kind of understand what's going to happen, which helps you help them prioritize not only the work that they're doing, but the work that's to come. So it also helps you really kind of shape shift how you, corral isn't the best word, but it's really how do you create that space, that safety that allows them to communicate what you need for them to communicate, what you want for them and desire for them to communicate, not only about what their interests are, but what lights them up and what are they going to hold themselves accountable for? Because most often people are going to speak with what they have a passion about first, over something that is not necessarily the thing that lights them up.
Such a great leadership style, because you're not telling them what to do. You're creating space, and you're inviting them to participate into, the vision is there. How are we going to get there? And it's so much more collective, and people, you allow their own individual passions to contribute to the group. And that's just, such a great way of going about it. It's so conversational versus, no one really likes to be told what to do, especially if it's not their strength. So that's a great leadership, speaking to everyone's strengths and passions, and having a collective vision.
And even with that, you begin to understand where the gaps are. And maybe there are some things that the others won't, that they aren't good at, that needs to get done. So is it within that group that you go find it? Or is it a better use of time for a different resource? Part-time, full-time, new hire, an existing, you could even go to the rest of the team, if you will, and ask if anyone has interest in doing something for X, Y, and Z project that could bring them in and allow them to be in their strengths. So this one takes a little bit of time to get going, but the beauty of this one is that you end up, the word that's coming to mind is receiving time back. Because there's less contention. And again, you're creating that psychological safety for people to have honest conversations about what lights them up, what they believe are their strengths, or even maybe it's something that isn't in a strength, but it's of huge interest and they want to learn.
Mhm.
And I mean, as you and I know, the hardest part about some of this is doing the things that we're not necessarily good at. And then you finally give yourself time and you dig in and you
Mhm.
come out of it and you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. Or, yep, I can see where I can do that again, or no way will I do that again, right? I'm gonna go find somebody to do that.
And I think what's beautiful about this is it's true. I mean, in business, you're growing. Every day is different. It's new. You have your goal, but to get there, you have to, it's a journey. And so by communicating and, working together this way, everyone can develop and find their role and find and achieve the goal together.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it a lot more collaborative. And then you start to break down those other little barriers, if you will, and you start to learn the common themes. I think that's the biggest one out of all of this, even the retrospective, which I'll get to in just a minute. You start to learn themes. You start to pull things together and things start to make more sense that maybe wouldn't have made sense before.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, last but not least is the retrospective. And this is really all about reflecting on your progress. It's about your lessons learned and your themes. And the how you do that is identifying the what and how. So Danielle, I'll just use you an example since we were talking about, your huge revenue growth. It might be through this journey that every week you sit down and you reflect on the progress that you made. What was your intention for the week? What progress did you make? What did you learn? And what didn't go well? So this can be a multifaceted. I like to flip this on its head where most people say, what went well and what went wrong. And I like to look at it as what went well and what did you learn?
Mm.
Or what went well and what didn't go so well. And what do you take from that? Because there's always some lesson learned in it. Sometimes things need more time to process and digest. Sometimes you don't see the pain right away. But holistically, at a minimum, not to do that thing again. And so it might be, yep, we're going to steer away from X. Or you know what? C worked great. Let's go do more of that. So what it allows is everyone to really give a perspective, because you have some people who are pretty loud and vocal about what went well and what didn't go so well. And you have others that are quiet. And the whole invitation around this retrospective is that somebody has something to say. And I usually focus on, okay, tell me one good thing at minimum and one thing that didn't go well, because there's always something, and it could be the smallest of things, but then
Mhm.
And when you do retrospectives, especially in business, the whole aim is to be as agile as possible, to continue on to achieve your outcome, but not to continue doing the same thing again that isn't working, because it's a waste of energy. I'm going to rephrase that. I'm mindful of my language. It's not a good use of energy. It's not a good use of time. It certainly isn't a good use of money. And even coming from my background in corporate, some of the research that I did during and even after is even in companies as small as 100, if I remember correctly, it was a study done in 2018, so slightly dated. But in companies of 100, I believe it was roughly $400,000 a year was lost in miscommunication of projects.
Wow.
And projects in general, 70% of them that fail are from miscommunication. So when you get into, I think it was 100,000 employees, the number went up to like 40 million a year, or 400 million a year. It was some crazy number that I had never even thought about. And it makes sense when I think about the projects that I worked on and what went well, and the ones that I worked on that didn't go so well. and it was all centered around communication.
And you really think about this day and age, whether, you're talking about a company and its employees, and with so many people being virtual now, it's like you need to carve out that time and that space to, like you said, reflect and plan. And yeah, the communication becomes such a priority. And when your families, you need, like for our family, we try every night to sit down at the dinner table, because it's just that time where you can really communicate. And if you're going so fast, you don't make time, you will make the same mistakes again and again, and you just won't, you can actually save yourself time by making the time for the communication.
Yeah. You said it very well. If you're going so fast, which is always seems to be that push. And this gets into a little bit of the masculine and feminine energies, which all of us have and all of us need. You need to move things forward, yet you need that reflection, you need that creativity, because it really can allow for some amazing creativity. Yeah. So I think before we finish, I just want to kind of recap really quick, because we covered a lot. We covered kind of what communication looks like. I gave 9 different examples of what are the elements of communication. We talked about, getting what you want over being right. And hopefully that's starting to make a little bit more sense now, that often what you want and what, now I've lost my train of thought, to get what you want over being right, there's a difference, and it requires a little bit of vulnerability to really admit that what you truly want is it's not far off from what everyone else wants. And I think that's the other thing that I forgot to mention. It's so important to recognize that most people want the exact same thing. It's just, how are we communicating to get what it is that we want? We also talked about kind of this fun synergies of the dynamics that are shifting with the great wealth transfer, the gender shift, and now this legacy, and really this focus on the new language and impact investing, and what does it really mean, and how it's not as different as we think that it is. Mm-hmm. And then I gave some tactical examples for you to dig in and start practicing. Is there anything else, Danielle, that you and I have talked about that I didn't cover off here today that you think would be valuable?
Oh, I mean, honestly, I think you did such an amazing job. I always have new insights, new takeaways, not just within the family office sector and how we can think about, the changes and how we can show up and either serve or run, business, but also in our own personal lives, our own families. Communication is at the heart of everything. And I just love the way you encourage us to go within, really question what's driving our own desires, and look at it from a different perspective. And I think in this world of family offices, it's so much about understanding what is their perspective. And with family offices, it's really coming together and creating those missions. What are your values, and how can they drive the success of the family forward? So yeah.
Well, and I certainly know, coming from my own experience, and I would imagine that you see this a lot of the time too, ultimately the end goal is to keep the legacy alive.
Exactly.
And so there's a statement that's a pretty common statement, is what got you here won't get you to where you want to go. Mm-hmm. So how do you get to help shape that narrative to get you to your ideal state, which is keeping that legacy alive? And it might look a little different than what you would have thought, but the good news is there's time. There's always time. Mm-hmm. There's opportunity.
Yeah, and with these younger generation, they're bringing different viewpoints, different tools, adoption of technology, and it's about listening and compromising and communication. So I think that was wonderful, very insightful.
Thank you. Well, we went a little bit longer than I had planned, so I do still want to do the Q&A. So let's go to some Q&A.
Okay, awesome. Well, please feel free, for those of you that are still with us, submit any of your questions. There was one entered earlier. Let's see. Let me pull this up. Sorry, get that on my screen. How can we measure the impact or success of changing our communication approaches within our family office?
Would you repeat that a second time, please?
How can we measure the impact or success of changing our communication approaches within our family office?
That's a great question. I would say first and foremost is really sitting down and having that conversation about what does it look like today and where do you want it to go? So I use a really easy scale, and I know metrics are so important and you can go into a long list of making it really overcomplicated. What I've done with many of my clients is I say, okay, where are you at today? So if you know that your communication is off, go around the table with those at the table and ask on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think we are? And from there, you can glean some understanding of where people are feeling like the communication is well and where it's not well. And with that, you can do both. You can keep all of those numbers and keep them separate, and you can create a median. And then choose one thing to work on. Because it's not just about the metrics. It's one thing to have the metrics. It's another to make a decision that you're going to improve on something. Choose one thing and then start the work. Create that structure. What I love to do is, back to our earlier conversation about what does the vision look like? So sit with the family and say, okay, if we were to improve this by, let's say it went from 5 to 7, you all decide you want to be 7 at the end. What would that look like? What would it feel like? What would we be talking about? So you create this new reality, if you will, as part of that. And then you start to take the actions for it. You start to implement things that are consistent. At a minimum, consistency on a monthly basis. Ideally, you're doing it every week or every other week, because it takes a while to create new habits. And then at the end of, say, 6 months, go back and remeasure. So that's a very simple example. You might see things like the time invested in meetings reduces drastically. You've increased your time availability, which then gets to your money. Our, as they say, time is money. So there's some very simplistic ways to measure that and then to keep track. The big thing really is making a choice, one thing, the commitment, and then you do kind of call it a pre and a post. And you create that structure.
Amazing. We have another. Thank you, Kevin, for submitting. How do you handle a conversation with someone who thrives on conflict, a person who thinks vigorous debate brings out the best results?
Oh, I could go into the deep psychological aspects of this. The way that I approach it as somebody who knows a lot more about why that person is doing it, it's coming from a place of insecurity. And so in addition to that, that person really wants to be heard. So when I go into these conversations, as much as I possibly can, I go in to learn and listen and understand their motives over attempting to talk over them or attempting to get my voice heard. It doesn't take long. Somebody will pick up on what you sitting back and being really patient. That's really the EQ part of it. They will start to reveal things to you. So if somebody was in conflict and likes to be in conflict because it brings out the best, I might ask them to, when they finish, I might say to them, is there anything else you would like to share with me that's bothering you? Or is there anything else that has been on your mind that we haven't talked about? Where else could we take this? Tell me more. Tell me more. It's always just a great, simple statement when you're in conversation with somebody. The hardest part is making sure that we don't project back onto them, because in essence, they're inviting that. And what you're doing is you're flipping it on its head and saying, no, I'm going to hear you first. And if the meeting ends and there's no time left and you've not had your voice heard, it's okay to say, you know what? It feels like another meeting is necessary. I've heard you. I've heard what you've talked about. I would like to be able to bring something. So could we walk away from this conversation and know that we're going to come back together so that we can find a middle ground or a more productive place to be.
It's like why they say take the higher road, you know?
Yeah, I have a favorite author. His name is Chris Voss, and he is a former FBI negotiator, one of the most well-known. And he likes to say, you don't go into a hostage situation and say to the kidnapper, oh, you know what? Let's just split the difference. You take 2 and I'll take 2. So his work is all around tactical empathy is what he calls it.
Okay.
And it's something that I have gotten a lot more into. And in fact, I'm focused on now this year for me for a skill up level is motivational interviewing, which is really about digging deep into that EQ spot. I think the last piece of this is when people come at you, when you can look at and feel just in your body that this is not about me, it's about them. It can really change your perspective on everything.
That makes me think of my favorite book, The 4 Agreements. So often it has very little to do with you. And so when you keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Well, I see that we are at the top of the hour here. It's 2 o'clock. Stacy, I cannot thank you enough. This was just an amazing presentation. I'm so grateful. We have a recording of it. Thank you to those of you who participated, and I'm glad we do have all of Stacy's information, which we will be sending out so that they know where to get in touch with you. I will also say, if any of you are on LinkedIn, Stacy puts amazing content out. It's really fun to get to know her personally and professionally. And as she, shares more and starts to unroll equity, it will be really nice to keep up with her there as well.
Yes. Thank you, Danielle, for this opportunity and to give value to you and your family office list family.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the afternoon, and I look forward to all that's to come with us, Stacy. So thank you.
You too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.